Yes. So this glossary, the reason why we're doing it is because when we start reading disciplinary literature on any topic, it's really tough. The scholars who are engaged in this discussion have been engaged in this discussion for a long time. They're adding to what people have already said, and they're assuming that all of the audience knows, like what the terms are, what they mean, where the conversation has been, and they're there to add something new. The thing is as we enter into it, we don't know all the things. And so what we're doing is we're isolating the disciplinary terms, those specific terms that they're using to try and figure out what they mean. And in so doing, we'll be able to understand the literature more when we do a research paper, which you're going to do at the end. It will help you as you analyze your own literacy story through the lens of Barone and Grimm. And it will just help you understand what people are saying and help you join in that conversation. So I gave you a list of terms that you can use, that you can add to your glossaries. And I think that will help you in understanding the impact of diversity in literacy education. So you can add additional term definitions from Barone and Grimm. You can also add definitions from the latest text, the navigating conversational terms, turns. And I know some of you already started adding terms like anti-racism, which was in that 2007 text, but was not in the 2002 text. So you can see how they're adding on to the conversation. Systemic racism was in there specifically. You're probably seeing other terms also. Zoe's going to show you how to access academic resources through the library database. And she'll talk about the advantages of using that versus Google. Keep adding to the glossary. You can add terms, add definitions. Remember, label everything with your name because you're getting an individual grade. And remember to add a citation for any text you use. This should be an MLA 8 citation. Do it as you go and you won't have to adjust. Plus, you're not getting a grade on this yet, and I'll let you know, hey, the citation works, or check again. There are things due tomorrow. There is an assignment due tomorrow based on what we're doing in this library session. Choose one of the terms from the glossary, use the library database to identify a definition, and then post that to Canvas. Be sure to include the term, a quotation with the definition, and the citation, the MLA 8 citation. And you can add that to the glossaries just so you're getting started. Here's a list of the things that are due on Saturday. Remember, I'm not grading yet. I'm giving you feedback that you can use to revise. And then everything is due on March 27 before you go on that mini spring break. That is 3 days of rest and recovery. So I am done. Any questions for me before I turn this over to Zoe?
Okay.
Okay. Zoe, it's
all right. Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Trainer. I'm a librarian at the library, and I do a lot of these sessions with first-year students, introducing them to the library, talking about the kind of resources that we have that you might not be familiar with, and how to use them for the projects like the one that you're working on right now. Before I start, will all of you just give me a reaction, a yes or no, if you've had a session like this where you talked about finding resources in the library, about what peer review articles mean, about doing academic college level research? Has anyone had one of those sessions before? Give me a little yes or no so I know where we're all at. No.
No.
Anybody? Has anybody had one of those? I see one yes. Mostly no's. Let me open the chat again. Okay. So Hannah, it might be a little bit of review for you. But the good thing is this often takes a couple of tries watching and learning about this and applying it for different kinds of research projects. So I do have a quick PowerPoint, and because so few of you have had a library assignment, I'm going to do a quick overview to talk about the kinds of things that the library has in its collection. And then I'm going to do a kind of a deeper dive into some of the resources that I think are going to be really helpful, or how to find the resources I think that are going to be really helpful for this glossary project that you're working on now. Does that sound good before we jump in? All good? Okay. So while I'm talking, if you have questions, it's actually easier for me if you just unmute yourself and ask. I find when I'm sharing a screen, I have a really hard time also watching the chat. I'm using a laptop and the screen is just not big enough to have everything up. So if you have a question while I'm going, feel free just to hop on and ask it. Okay. And then at the end, hopefully I will talk quickly enough. And at the end, I'm going to give you some time to actually try doing the research and looking for the encyclopedias and dictionaries that are going to be really helpful for defining these terms. So then if you do have a question at that point, I'll be here and you can come back and we can have a conversation about it later. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we're just going to start with a quick overview of the library and some resources that the library has that I think are going to be really helpful. Let me just put this on present. It's loading. All right. So if this was a normal year, we'd be in the library and we'd all be in the classrooms in the basement, and we'd be sitting in a room together and going over this. But luckily, the library space is important and useful, but a lot of the collection can be accessible from anywhere. So no matter where you're doing your research, you can use the library collection. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different types of library sources, especially the ones I think that are going to be helpful for the assignment you're working on. Talk briefly about search terms, and then I'm going to dive into showing you one search where you can access these resources. Okay, so first, I like to think about finding the right type of source. I want you to understand the different types of sources we have in our collection, because it's kind of like helping you understand how to find the right tool for the job. Like, this is my favorite new metaphor. I'm still working on it, but if I had this picture, it's a picture of like rusty horseshoes and wrenches and I don't know, whatever different kinds of tools, right? If I asked you what is the correct tool, there's not really an answer for that, right? Because it depends on the job you're trying to do. If you're trying to tighten a bolt, you're going to need one kind of tool. If you're trying to put shoes on a horse, you're going to need a different type of tool, right? So the resources in the library are the same. None is the correct type of resource. It just depends on the type of information you're looking for, the type of research project that you're doing, which one is correct. All right, so that's my big metaphor. So none of these are right or wrong, just depends on what you're trying to do. So here's a quick overview of the types of sources you're going to find in the library and how they might be a little different than sources you've seen and used in other classes. So academic books is a large part of our collection. And so these are often published by an academic press. So you'll see the publishers, University of Texas or Oxford University. And they're mostly written by academics. So they're written by experts in the field, right? From PhDs or other types of professors that really know what they're talking about. But like Erin was saying earlier, they are writing for other experts in the field, right? So they're using the jargon, they're using the language of the field. The other thing you might find when we're looking at academic books is that they're in edited volumes. So each chapter might have a different author, kind of like the readers that you use in classes. And sometimes when I'm working with students and you're working on maybe a 5 or 10 page paper, I say books are a great place to start. And students don't look at me like I'm crazy, because they say I don't want to read 200 or 300 pages or 400 pages for my 5 or 10 page paper, which I understand, but often you don't have to read the whole book. There might be a chapter or the introduction or the conclusion, or you can use the index in the back to look up terms. And there might be sections that can be very helpful. Often academic books can have a broader subject, right? When we get to articles, they're going to be very focused and specific. And so if you have a pretty big topic, sometimes books are the best place to look. Okay, next we have encyclopedias. And I want to put a star on this for your glossaries right now, because these are a type of source you might not be familiar with in the kind of higher education sense that are going to be very helpful for your glossaries. So the library has encyclopedias like World Book or Britannica that you might have used when you were in grammar school and doing like a report on penguins or something. And we have those, but we also have these subject-specific encyclopedias, dictionaries, and handbooks that are designed to help people learn a new subject and understand the language and the way that different subjects use terms. And I have an example picture on this slide, which is a 3-volume encyclopedia called the Grove Encyclopedia of Islamic Art and Architecture. So if you were learning about Islamic art and architecture and you wanted to look up what a particular symbol means in Islamic art or architecture, or the name of a famous palace and what it represents and what it's an example of, this encyclopedia is really going to focus on that subject. And so encyclopedias include kind of just the facts as much as is possible, right? They're really talking about, they're not making an argument so much. And the entries are going to be pretty short. So sometimes they're 1 page and sometimes they're maybe up to 10 pages in these subject encyclopedias. When we find them in OneSearch, they're going to be called reference entries, right? They're reference books because you just refer to them. You maybe read 1 section or 2 sections. You're not reading it from cover to cover most of the time, unless you're into that. And if you are, more power to you. But normally you just use them kind of to refer to. And we're going to be looking for these in OneSearch a little bit later, because I think these are going to be very, very helpful for your glossaries. So next we have academic journal articles. And these are the things that your professors are calling peer-reviewed articles. You might have heard that before in some classes. If you haven't heard it yet, you will definitely hear it at some point. And like Erin was talking about earlier about scholars having conversations, this is kind of the easiest place to see those scholarly conversations, right? Generally, these articles are presenting new research, some sort of new research project, some sort of new idea or theory. And the audience is going to be other experts in the field. So they're going to use that language, that jargon of the field, because they're expecting that other people are going to understand what they're talking about, because they're also involved in that field. So they're going to have an extensive works cited list, and that's going to be where you can see this conversation, right? They're quoting other people, they're connecting their research into other research in the field. And they're sometimes called scholarly or peer-reviewed journals, and they're very expensive. So these are things you might not find for free just searching on Google, right? A lot of them you have to have a subscription that can cost hundreds to thousands of dollars a year. And that's why you have to go through the library. So we know that you're part of SDSU in order to get full access to them. So on this slide, I have an example of a peer-reviewed journal called Atmospheric Chemistry and Physics. So since I am not an atmospheric chemist or physicist, I would probably have a very difficult time reading the articles in this journal, right? I'm not involved in the field. I'm not really the audience. They're going to use the jargon of the field. But if I were an atmospheric chemist and I had done a new research project that I wanted other people to see, I would submit my article to this journal. And before it's published, the journal would send it out to other atmospheric chemists to review it, right? So those are my peers, and they do the review to make sure that my findings are sound, that I did a good job setting up my experiment, that I did did a good job analyzing my data, that it is worthy of sharing and being part of the record, academic record on this topic, right? So that's what this peer review idea is called. And it's not foolproof. Occasionally articles have to get retracted later, or they realize that they kind of messed up. But it does give another kind of level of authority, right? Someone else is checking this besides me, the atmospheric chemist. All right, any questions about that? I know that's sometimes a kind of a weird type of publication, and often you'll be told to find it without given a lot of direction on how to do that. So we'll talk a little bit about how to find those as well, even though for the glossary portion of the project, they might not be that helpful. Though they could be very helpful for the next part where you're talking about finding examples, right? If you wanted to find some sort of research examples of diversity or literacy or the other concepts you're doing in action, academic journal articles can be a good place to go. All right, one more. Oh, went too far. Oh, goodness. Here we go. Okay, so next are newspaper and magazine articles, which you've probably seen before. These articles are written by journalists. They have a different type of research they're doing, right? Unlike the previous academic peer-reviewed journal articles, they're not really, most of the time, they're not doing the experiments themselves. They're interviewing people or analyzing data and other things like that, right? So it's a different type of research that goes into magazine and newspaper articles. Some magazines and newspapers have a very particular bias or point of view, right? There's articles from the left that are magazines that are more progressive and kind of left wing. There's also more conservative kind of right wing magazines. So if you're not familiar, if you find an article and you're not familiar with the publication, I recommend Googling it and even just looking at the Wikipedia page, because that will tell you a little bit more about the newspaper or magazine and what its point of view is. Because it's not bad to have a point of view or to have a bias, right? But if you're choosing this as a supporting document for your research or for your paper, you should know what that bias is and you should choose it intentionally, right? So if you're not familiar, go look it up. The other thing that newspapers and magazine articles are really good for are for timely things. If you were looking for something that was really recent, it takes a long time to get an article written in the peer review process, or to get into an encyclopedia or an academic book, right? So if you want something that has happened in the last kind of few years, sometimes magazine and newspaper articles are the place to go. And they're also really helpful if you have if you're interested in kind of a local topic. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how to find them at SDSU. And we're going to use OneSearch, which is kind of the Google of the library. It includes our books, it includes our ebooks, it includes most of our journal and magazine subscriptions, it includes our DVD collection and our streaming video collection, and basically kind of all of it. Almost, not everything is in there, but a lot of our collection is in there. And it's the search box on the main page of the library website. But before we get there, I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about selecting keywords, because it's a little bit different than searching in Google. When I search Google, I can put in a whole sentence, right? Like what my question is, the whole thing, and I often get an answer. But might not be a very good answer, but I get some sort of an answer, right? But if you're doing that in the library databases or in OneSearch, you're not going to find anything. Instead, you really need to think about the most important kind of single word or short phrase. So the words in your list are going to probably work pretty well, at least the ones that I've seen, like literacy was one of them, right? Diversity was one of them. So those are single words, and that will work pretty well as keywords. However, they're pretty broad, right? So that's kind of a name of a concept or a phrase, right? It's going to work, but we might want to narrow it down. So just diversity is so broad, we might want to kind of talk about diversity in education, or diversity in higher education, or diversity in universities, right? And down here is this little Venn diagram. And that's how we can narrow things down in the library database. So if we have diversity in one circle and education in the other circle, and we're looking for articles that include both terms, then we're just going to get the overlap area that includes both terms, right? Just the middle of this Venn diagram. So that's going to be fewer results that are hopefully more focused on our topic. So the more terms you put in, the fewer results you're going to get, right? It's going to narrow down your results, which can be really helpful. But if you put too many in, if you put a whole sentence there, it's going to narrow it down too much. You're not going to get anything at all, right? So think about the search terms that you're using. You can start broad and then add more to kind of narrow it down. And things that don't work that well are complete sentences, right? Like I was saying, or value or relationship words, like things that you as a person, as the human being, have to kind of judge, don't work that well. So things like, I was working with someone who was looking for like positive aspects of something, and the computer, the databases aren't smart enough to judge what positive aspects are. It's just looking for those actual letters in that same, like that word, right? It's looking for the word positive aspects. It's not looking for what we would judge to be a positive aspect. So you have to actually use the words that you would like to appear in the title of a book or the title of an article. And those words like effect and impact also don't work very well. So think more about who, what, and where, kind of proper names, or a short phrase when we're working with keywords. Any questions about that? I'm going to kind of demo how I would do that for this topic. So let me flip over to the library website. Let's see, there was okay. So here we go. Here's the library website. Get rid of my chat box. Okay, so here it is. And then this box right here is searching one search, right? So if we search everything, it's going to search everything, including the website. So I like either clicking over here to one search, that's going to search all of the collections of the library, right, that I was just mentioning in that presentation. Or if we were just looking for books, we could click on the books tab. If we just want peer-reviewed articles, we could click on the peer-reviewed articles tab. The journals tab is going to give us the name of actual journals. So if we were looking for that atmospheric chemistry and physics journal, we could put the title of that in here and search for it, but it's not going to give us the articles. Databases, if there was a different library collection of articles that we're looking for, if your professor says, hey, I want you to search JSTOR or search ERIC, you can click on the databases tab and search for those. Archives is going to give us our special collections items, and then the website is just searching the web page itself. So I like to start with one search, and I'm going to do a search for literacy, because that was the example that Erin gave us, and just kind of talk about how we might do a search for that if we were looking for a definition, an academic type of definition that we could use for this glossary. So I'm just using literacy right now as my search term. I like to start broad and then narrow it down if I'm getting too much. And in this case, I'm getting a lot, right? 1.3 million results, way more things than I want to look at. And if we scroll down, you see I'm getting things that are called literacy, right? And different types of resources. I'm getting books, I'm getting some videos. This looks like it's a government document and even a journal called literacy. So that's a little bit overwhelming. I do not want help right now, thank you. So what I'm going to do is use on the left-hand side here of my screen, I'm going to use these limits to narrow down my results to get me the type of resource that I'm looking for. And in this case, I want one of those encyclopedias. I want a good overview and kind of history and background of the term literacy. And I think I might be able to find that in one of those reference books. So I can see all the different types of resources that came up in my results. But I'm going to go down here to where it says reference entry, and then I'm going to filter that. And now I go from 1.3 million down to a very reasonable 22,000 results, which is still a lot, but not a bad limit, right? So now you're seeing the title. It's telling me that it's a reference entry, right? So it's an entry in one of those reference books. And the entry name is literacy. And below that, we're seeing what the title of the encyclopedia is. So this one is The World of Jim Crow America, a Daily Life Encyclopedia. And that sounds interesting, but if I'm looking for literacy in the educational context, it might not be exactly this kind of historical idea. It might not be exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to keep going down. And then number 2 is from an encyclopedia called the Sage Encyclopedia of Educational Research, Measurement, and Evaluation. So that sounds a little bit more like what I might find useful. So I'm going to click on the title to see a little bit more information. And here it's telling me that it's from this encyclopedia. It's not, sometimes it gives you more information on this page. In this case, it didn't really give me that much more. So in order to see it, I'm going to click on this link where it says full text available. Now, this is the only drawback of the online version of these encyclopedias, right? When they're print, you have like the 3 volumes. I'd go to L, I would find the volume that included L, and then it would be alphabetical, and I'd go look up literacy. It seems like when you're doing this search, it should take you exactly to that literacy section, but unfortunately it doesn't. It just takes you to the home page kind of for this encyclopedia. So it can be a little bit confusing, and this is where sometimes students get tripped up. But think about it like that world book that you used when you were researching penguins and how that worked, right? You just looked for P for penguin, same thing for this. I'm going to look for L for literacy. So I'm going to click on entries A to Z, click on L. See, it's all alphabetical. You would think when they changed it to an ebook, they could have done some better linking. It didn't work, but let's not judge. Let's just deal with what we have. So I'm going to click on the entry for literacy and show you what a subject encyclopedia entry kind of looks like. So here we go. We have literacy. And then down here, we have the definition. So the term literacy is commonly defined as the ability to read, write, and understand print language. In reality, literacy is more encompassing than such a simple definition. So it's giving us an actual definition that we could use. It's quoting the International Literacy Association, which might be something we'd also want to look up ourselves if we wanted to. And then it's going to give us a historical overview of how the term literacy is used, what aspects of literacy there are, visual literacy, different types of literacy, instruction, literacy development as a child, right? And then at the bottom here, it's also giving us places to go for further reading, which can be really helpful if this is not a subject that you know, right? You can go down here and use her bibliography to find more resources that could be very authoritative places about literacy, right? Kind of the most important places for literacy from kind of an education research point of view. So these are great for things like a glossary, right? This is almost a glossary, but it's like an expanded glossary. Your glossary is going to be shorter, but you could really get a lot of the background information that you need in an encyclopedia like this. Now, one other important thing that you have to do for your papers is citing them, right? You have to cite the places that you got this. So I want you to make a note here. After this encyclopedia entry, you see a name, right? That's the person that actually wrote this encyclopedia entry. Not all encyclopedias have this, but I would say the majority of the subject encyclopedias like this one that are focused on a particular subject are going to give credit to the person who wrote it. So this database lets me click this kind of quote tool here to format a citation for me, and I can choose MLA. But make a note, Bruce Frey is the editor of the entire encyclopedia. And I believe if you look at the MLA style guide, when you're citing an entry, there's an actual way that you can cite the person who wrote that particular entry and not be citing the whole encyclopedia. So I would copy this, but I would also look at the OWL style guide or whatever style guide you're using to make sure that you're citing the encyclopedia entry properly, if that makes sense. because this citation here is just citing the whole book, not this actual one, 2 or 3 page entry on literacy. All right, any questions from you guys about, you can put it in the chat, I'll try to pull up my chat. Any questions about these encyclopedias? Do you see why I'm saying that they could be really helpful for an assignment like the glossary that you're working on? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. I really do think it gives you, it's nice because it doesn't just define the term, it also gives kind of the background of how a term has evolved in usage, right, over time, which is helpful for this kind of work. Okay, so let's try another one. I'm going to give you one more example of looking for a reference entry that might be a little bit challenging. So I'm going to say search again, so it gets rid of my filters. And the other term that was in the assignment as an example is diversity, right? So I'm going to do a search for diversity, and we're probably going to get more than now we're getting 4 million results, right? And again, we're getting results from all different places. Diversity, the invention of a concept. It's from 2003, but that might be a good book if you wanted to read a whole book about diversity. But if you don't, if you are looking for more of a concise overview, the encyclopedias are going to be good again, right? Oops, I just did it as a newspaper search. That's not what I wanted to do. Let me go back. No, lost it. Try again. So one thing you might want to do in this case, because even when we limit to even when we limit to encyclopedia entry in this case, we're going to be getting so many different things. Scrolling down, reference entry, go. Even as we do that, we're going to be getting diversity reference entries from all different types of resources, right? So here's one about American civil rights and liberties. That one might be helpful. But here's an entry on diversity from an encyclopedia called Ethics, Science, Technology, and Engineering. Here's one, different industrial organizational psychology, right? Diversity is such a big topic that is used in so many fields. We're getting all different types of results. So if we wanted to narrow it down to education, there's something that we could do. We could do another, we can go to advanced search, and we could look for diversity anywhere, right? But then if we wanted an encyclopedia that had education in its title, we could try that, right? So here it's telling it that I want diversity to appear anywhere, but in the title, I'd also like it to include the word education. So this is like adding a second circle to the Venn diagram, right? And I'm just hopefully going to get the narrow down results that are in the middle that include both of those terms. So when I say search, I went from like 1 million results down to, or 4 million results down to 179,000 results, right? And if we look at these titles, diversity in education, a multicultural approach, tolerance in education, we're getting a little bit more focused on education type of results, right? That's good. And then if I still want to go look at those reference entries, now I can go look at those 2,000 reference entries that have the word education somewhere in the title. So here's one, diversity pedagogy, diversity in higher education, right? This is from an encyclopedia of online education. This one's encyclopedia of intercultural competence. So I could then do the same thing I was doing before, click on the title, get to the full text of this encyclopedia, and then read that entry on diversity. So that's a way to kind of narrow it down when you're working with a very broad topic like diversity is. And then if we wanted to take off our filter for reference entries, If you do want some peer-reviewed academic articles, right, as you're working on this project kind of down the line, over here, when we click on peer-reviewed journals, it's going to limit just to those. So we'll get those research articles, right, about diversity, and then what does it mean? What is diversity versus inclusion? And some of these might be more kinds of editorial types of articles, but we're getting things from Journal of Teacher Education, from Medical Education, Educational Researcher, right? And then to get the full text of these, we could click on the title. It's going to give us a little more information about this article. If we scroll down, it's going to give us some subject headings, some keywords that this article is about, and then we can click on basically any of these links to get the full text of the article. So I'm already logged in. Now it works if you're logged into your email account. You don't have to log in from off campus. But if you're not, a screen will come up and ask you to log in with your SDSU ID. But once you do that, you'll see this and you'll just get right into the full text of the article, right? So here's this article if you wanted to read this one. All right, so I'm gonna stop my sharing for a minute. We've got a few minutes left, so why don't we do like 5 or 10 minutes, 5 minutes of you all opening up a library window. It's at library.sdsu.edu, and then doing a search on one of your terms. And I can sit here and hang out. And if you have any questions, you can either speak up or you can pop into the chat and ask them. Any questions before we do that? Got one? You got an assignment due tomorrow, so you might as well get a jump on doing that research. So go ahead and do that, and I'll just hang out if any questions come up. Erin, do you have anything else to add?
No, this was really great. Thank you, Zoe.
I'm happy to do it. I have to relocate because I need to plug my computer in, but I'll be here. I'm going to turn my video off for a second, but I'm here if you have any questions as you're practicing.
How are you all doing?
Anyone have any success? Did anyone find some good definitions for their terms they were researching? Yes, no? Anyone stuck?
If you're stuck on anything, this is a really good time to talk about it, because Zoe will be able to show you how to get unstuck.
Mm-hmm. All right, I guess not. Hopefully that was helpful. There's two things I want to share with you, how to get help later, because sometimes it seems easy now and then later you try to work on it and you totally forget what we were talking about. So you can always email me at I just chatted my email address, ztrainer@sdsu.edu. Or if you noticed when I was doing the chat earlier, or when I was doing my research earlier, that little chat box kind of popped out. You can use that Ask Us link on the library website. And that is going to give you let me go here. And that's going to give you live chatting with the librarian at any time. It's librarians from SDSU during the week, Monday through Friday, like business hours kind of. But then after hours or on the weekend, you'll be talking to a real live librarian from somewhere, but we have cooperative coverage for those times. So if it is later in the evening, you might not talk to one of us, but they can help you get started and refer you to one of us if you need more help. There's a link to the Ask Us 24/7, but it's linked on the main page, and it's going to pop out and ask you if you need help. But if you need help, ask. That's what we're here for. We're happy to help you, walk you through the research process with your own topic, and access high quality information that's going to make your job easier. So the other idea about using the resources in the library is that when you have high quality resources, when you have articles either from encyclopedias or from peer-reviewed journals that are written by experts, it's going to make your job as the writer easier, right? You're building a foundation on the work of these experts. You're building your argument, you're building your project and your writing. And if you have a strong foundation, it's going to make it easier to write a good paper or turn in a good project. So it's not that there isn't good stuff available on Google, right? There's a ton of stuff there. That's great. But it's a lot more work for you to kind of sort through who is the person that wrote this, what is their perspective, what's their point of view, what are they trying to accomplish by writing this and publishing this. And when you're using academic sources, you kind of already know that. You kind of know that they're part of a scholarly community that's communicating using peer-reviewed articles and journal articles and books. And that kind of makes it a little bit easier for you as the writer to determine if it's going to be a high quality source to use for a paper. So that's it. The library is here to make your lives easier. So ask for help if you need it. Use our collections. And that's all I have to, those are my big plugs for the library. And I look forward to seeing all of you face to face, hopefully next year at some point, next fall. All right, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You're welcome. Thanks. You're welcome, guys.
Thanks so much, Zoe. That was really, really great.
Good, I'm glad. Well, nice to see your face and nice to meet with your students. So have a good Monday and have a nice week, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, I'll see you later.
Bye. Any final questions for me? I mean, we're done. Any questions? Then let's close this out. I'll see you again on Wednesday.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.